and how can we work together.
Hello and welcome, I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories of this hour. Pope Leo has hosted South African President Cyril Ramaphosa at the Vatican on Saturday, stressing cultural exchange and mutual understanding amid a growing diplomatic rift with Washington. The visit came a day after U.S. President Donald Trump announced a boycott of the G20 summit in South Africa, citing persecution of white farmers, which South Africa denies. France has urged its citizens to leave Mali immediately, joining the US and UK in warning against all travel amid a sharp escalation in violence. The alert follows reports of 14 civilians killed in Lere and a fuel blockade by al-Qaeda-linked JNIM, which has crippled Mali. Ukraine claims that 1,436 African nationals from 36 countries are fighting alongside Russian troops in Ukraine, with many lured and scammed by false promises of jobs. Kyiv has urged African governments to warn citizens as South Africa investigates 17 of its men trapped in the conflict after being recruited under fake employment contracts. A Nigerian court has set November 20th for judgment in the terrorism case against Nnamdi Kanu, leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, after he refused to present his defense despite 6 days granted. Kanu has filed a motion claiming terrorism is no longer an offense in Nigeria, while Justice James Omotosho rejected further delays. President Donald Trump has announced the U.S. will boycott the G20 summit in South Africa, accusing the host nation of abuses against white farmers and calling its selection a complete disgrace. President Cyril Ramaphosa has rejected the claims as false, marking another major escalation between South Africa and U.S. The UN World Food Programme has warned that 3 million people in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo now face emergency-level hunger as conflict, displacement, and a $350 million funding shortfall pushes the region to the brink. WFP Country Director Cynthia Jones has urged urgent action amid relentless fighting between M23 rebels, and the government forces. The Israeli military has confirmed that it has shot dead a Palestinian man during a raid in the el-fasher refugee camp in the western bank. The IDF said that the suspect planned to harm soldiers, yet no troops were injured in the operation. The Philippines has now evacuated over 100,000 people as Super Typhoon Uwan, also known as Fangvong, heads towards Luzon with torrential rains and destructive winds. Authorities have raised signal number 5 in Catanduanes and parts of Camarines as the storm threatens to make landfall in Aurora province. Now we start with Sudan. The United Nations Human Rights Office in Sudan is warning of escalating violence in el-fasher after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces seized the city last month. The UN reports that brutal attacks have increased in the past 10 days, turning el-fasher into the city of grief. Civilians who survived the siege and conflict over the last 18 months are now enduring atrocities on an unimaginable scale, with hundreds killed, including women and children. Meanwhile, aid groups report dire conditions in Tawila, a town where thousands of displaced people have fled. Over 16,000 refugees are living in extreme hardship with little access to food, medicine, nor shelter. Doctors Without Borders have reported that high levels of malnutrition among both children and adults in the area. The humanitarian crisis in Darfur continues to worsen as the conflict deepens. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Doctor, now looking at the Sudan situation, how might this escalation in el-fasher impact Sudan's political stability and prospects for negotiated settlement with RSF?
Of course, there is an impact, but at the same time, rapid support forces is originally established from the armed group which try to crack down the rebellion in the Darfur, and that time they were notorious because of the committing many war crimes in Darfur. So that's why currently the rapid support forces commit many crimes in the el-fasher, which was a foreign city. So it is indeed understandable and very dangerous. If of course, international community was very strong bond, like the 1990s, when they tried to stop the atrocities of the Serbia-backed military forces in the Bosnia-Herzegovina or the Kosovo. Of course, under current situation of the Sudan is a very big problem for the international community. But now, for the international community, they are divided, the US side, China, Russia side, and at the same time, there are many big conflicts in Russia's invasion of Ukraine or the Middle East. And so that's why there are many conflicts in the world, including Sudan, Myanmar, others. The international community do not have enough power to intervene. So that's why the tragedy has happened, and this is a war crime, but at the same time, no one stopped it. It's a tragic situation, and someone must stop it. Of course, that's true, but at the same time, there is no power to do it.
Right. As you mentioned, there is no one to stop it, or no one capable of stopping it. Do you think there's any international community that could still leverage on diplomatic or economic pressure to prevent further atrocities?
Generally, the regional leading country can take charge of the issue in the region. Could happen. For example, in case of that is, for example, in the Northeast Asia, there are many big countries. In the Oceania, Australia can take charge, something like that. But in case of Africa, we cannot find such kind of greater powers than others. So that's why indeed there is no superpower to deal with. There is no regional power to do it. Both their lack of power is the situation. So that's why it is very difficult to deal. If there is if there is an organization to take charge, African Union could be the organization, but I think that their power is not enough.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now moving on, the UN Refugee Agency has issued an urgent call for greater international assistance as thousands of people continue to move out of Sudan's Darfur region into an overstretched Chad. UNHCR Deputy High Commissioner R. Kelly Clements noted that the arrival of new people need everything from a safe space to clean water to an ability to restart their lives. The influx into Chad is a direct result of the deadly rampage in el-fasher following its capture by the paramilitary rapid support forces. According to UN statistics, over 40,000 people have lost their lives so far, though aid groups warn the true death toll is likely far higher, while more than 11 million have been displaced, giving rise to the worst displacement and most severe humanitarian disasters. Now we welcome back Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Doctor, for staying with us. Now, building on your answer from the previous discussion and staying on this topic, do you think this, as you also mentioned African Union, there is this African Union, but African Union is so far incapable of contracting this. What does African Union typically do, or is supposed to do as a union to look over entirely Africa entirely?
The force, military force consists by the many army of the African nations and maintain peace after the conflict is over. That has really made, in case of the Somalia or some area also, they try to be the peacekeeping force. But at the same time, their intervention is based on the armed forces of the Africa, means that indeed African nations are not so rich countries, so that's why what they can do is limited. It's because of the budgetary size, because of the equipment of the armed forces and training level also. So that's why the African Union cannot take charge. And in case of the impact of this issue is indeed big, because once the refugee has happened and huge numbers, they go outside of the country, and that place is, of course, that country face a serious situation because a huge refugee means that they cannot maintain law and order or control the region. So that's why if the huge refugee going to the Chad or the Libya, South Sudan or other area, of course each country try to take charge to care about refugee camp, but indeed it is very difficult to control, and the unrest situation will spread to the other country. So that could happen, and that is the reason the United Nations asked many international community to support countries affect refugees from Sudan. But at the same time, many countries in the world is still too busy to support other conflicts in the world. And now, in case of Sudan, they lack enough support indeed.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru Nagao for joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, the United Nations World Food Programme has issued a dire warning revealing that 3 million people in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo is now facing emergency levels of hunger, a figure that has nearly doubled in the past year amid relentless conflict and a severe funding crisis. WFP Country Director Cynthia Jones has noted an alarming reality for families who are skipping their meals, depleting all their household assets, and selling off their animals as their last resort. According to IPC Food Insecurity Report, nearly 25 million people face high levels of hunger and 3 million are in the emergency phase. Meanwhile, the United Nations has reported that people are already dying of hunger in the parts of Eastern DRC. The crisis is fueled by ongoing fighting between M23 rebels, allegedly backed by Rwanda, which is denied Kigali and the DRC Congo government forces. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ayanuga Olugbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst, joins us live from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you very much, Ayanuga, for joining us again. Good to see you. Ayanuga, now looking at this situation in Eastern Congo, as we also discussed yesterday, how is this food crisis in Eastern DRC affecting regional stability and cross-border relations with neighboring countries, particularly Rwanda? Ayanuga, hi. The United Nations World Food Programme has issued a dire warning, revealing that 3 million people in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is now facing emergency levels of hunger, a figure that has nearly doubled in the past year amid relentless conflict and a severe funding crisis. WFP Country Director Cynthia Jones has noted an alarming reality for families who are skipping their meals, depleting all their household assets, and selling off their animals as their last resort. According to IPC Food Insecurity Report, nearly 25 million people face high levels of hunger and 3 million are in emergency phase. As the report suggests, the crisis is fueled by ongoing fighting between M23 rebels and allegedly backed by Rwanda, which is denied Kigali and the DRC Congo government forces. Meanwhile, the United Nations has reported that people are already dying of hunger in the parts of Eastern DRC. The United Nations World Food Programme has issued a dire warning, revealing that 3 million people in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is now facing emergency levels of hunger, a figure that has nearly doubled in the past year amid relentless conflict and severe funding crisis. WFP Country Director Cynthia Jones has noted an alarming reality for families who are skipping their meals, depleting all their household assets, and selling off their animals as their last resort. According to IPC Food Insecurity Report, nearly 25 million people face high levels of hunger and 3 million of them are in the emergency phase. Also, the United Nations has reported that people are already dying of hunger in the parts of Eastern DRC. Now we move on to our next news. The Prime Minister of Senegal, Ousmane Sonko, has addressed thousands of people at a rally that called to end dirty money in politics. This comes as tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets of Dakar for the rally organized by Senegal's ruling party, the African Patriots of Senegal for Work, Ethics and Fraternity. Prime Minister Sonko has vowed to put an end to corruption at the rally. Let's listen in.
Il faut qu'on neutralise le pouvoir de l'argent sale en politique. La politique est noble. La politique, c'est convaincre par les idées, c'est convaincre par le comportement, c'est convaincre par la droiture et l'intégrité. Kon ñi ñuy poursuivre actuellement nga xam ne politique moo taxoon ñuy dajji keesu réew mi te koo gis mu dajji keesu réew mi bu dee 1000 la jël 500 yi lay politiquer 500 yi mu yóbbu ko ci ay banques étrangères ne xaar ma préparer sama avenir loolu dina fi jeex ci réew mi.
President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and his colleague Sonko were elected in 2024 on pledges to cut debt and restore growth after years of what they say was mismanagement under previous President Macky Sall. Senegal is now struggling to fight against its finances as it grapples with a budget deficit of 14% of GDP and public debt estimated at 132% of GDP at the end of last year. In recent weeks, the government has imposed new taxes in tobacco, alcohol, and gambling, as well as on widely used digital money transfers. The Prime Minister of Senegal, Ousmane Sonko, has addressed thousands of people at a rally that called to end dirty money in politics. This comes as tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets The Prime Minister of Senegal, Ousmane Sonko, has addressed thousands of people at a rally that called to end dirty money in politics. This comes as thousands of people have taken to the streets of Dakar for the rally organized by Senegal's ruling party, the African Patriots of Senegal for Work, Ethics and Fraternity. Prime Minister Sonko has vowed to put an end to corruption at this rally. Let's listen in. For this discussion, we welcome Ayanuga Olugbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst, joins us live from Lagos. Thank you very much, Ayanuga, for joining us again. Good to see you. Ayanuga, now looking at the situation. Thank you. Ayanuga, now looking at the situation in Senegal, what more can you tell us about what's unfolding in Senegal, and how might Prime Minister and President's anti-corruption agenda is it effectively working, and if so, how is it effectively gaining back the public trust in Senegal?
Well, the gaining back the public trust is a very different kettle of fish entirely, because it is not just about the anti-corruption war. And when you talk of the anti-corruption war, it depends on who you ask. For some, they see it as a tool of witch hunt for political opponents and to silence dividends. And since you hardly see anyone that his hand is not in the cookie jar somehow, either in the past or in the present. So when the Prime Minister comes up with these stronger terms of fight against corruption to help free up the economy and make it more investor friendly. Of course, if you ask the opposition, they will say it's a tool for witch hunt, it's a tool for silencing dissidents and whatnot. And if you ask also the citizenry, because of the trust deficit over time among the ruling class and the citizenry, they are neither here nor there, because they see it as the people in power, while their hands are fully in the cookie jar and they are deeply enmeshed in corruption with very little way for them to get prosecuted. The political enemies are the ones that are being run after always. But overall, even when the citizen has this misgiving, the results that shows through greater investor confidence and ability to attract more foreign direct investment into the country, because now there are processes that gives investors confidence that okay, Senegal is getting some things right and it's a right place to invest in. So that over time will change the attitude of the people. But as we go to this period now, it is very intense that people are neither here nor there in the country. But then, if the prime minister keeps doing what he's doing, and he is not being sabotaged from within, because the prime minister can only propose law, the members of the parliament can only do their bit, but the civil servants and others who will carry out the due diligence in ensuring that those processes, those laws are adhered to. If they are internal sabotage and they are not helping the government to achieve its full potential, then the trust deficit will still continue between the people and the government, and the opposition will continue to have opportunity to say this is a tool for witch hunts rather than achieving its desired. So it depends on who you ask and how you view it based on where you stand at the moment in time.
And building on that, what are the potential political and economic consequences of the recent Senegal's tax increases on tobacco, alcohol, gambling, and digital transfers for Senegalese citizens and businesses? Are they supportive of this tax?
Of course, no citizen will be supportive of any tax increment, because on the long run, it is the citizens that pay whatever increase has been put on those things. And you know that for the average citizen who are poor and low income, these are some of the things they use to share up their spirits, to lift their spirits. So if they can no longer access it with ease like they used to because now it is more expensive. Of course, you don't expect them to be clapping for the government, but at the same time, the government who is increasing tariffs on some of these things are doing it, one, for revenue generation, two, to deter people because of the health challenges that poses to the society, and also because they want to build a society based on certain moral codes
Why?
that the religion, Senegal is predominantly an Islamic majority nation, and so the tenets of their faith are against some of these things, and part of the way they feel they can curb the excesses that are being witnessed in society is to make it inaccessible through increased tariff, and therefore I don't think that makes it inaccessible anyway, because tobacco, for example, is addictive, and people who are into it, no matter the price, they may just reduce consumption, but they will find a way to still get it. So I think that is what is happening at the moment. But on the long run, it stifles trade, in the country.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Ayanuga Olugbenga-Paul for joining us as a public affairs analyst from Lagos. Thank you very much. Now we move on to South Africa. Pope Leo XIV hosted Pope Leo XIV hosted South African President Cyril Ramaphosa at the Vatican City in a landmark meeting. This marks South Africa's first high-level engagement with the newly appointed pontiff. The discussions focused on humanitarian aid, climate justice, emergency response, global peace, and interfaith collaboration. Ramaphosa has emphasized dialogue and international cooperation, projecting calm, diplomacy, and reinforcing South Africa's commitment to partnership, social justice, and global collaboration. The visit comes amid diplomatic tensions following the U.S. decision to boycott the upcoming G20 summit in South Africa. U.S. President Donald Trump has cited alleged abuses against white farmers, claims that Ramaphosa and South African officials have dismissed as false. This historic engagement underscores efforts to strengthen cultural and diplomatic ties between the Vatican and South Africa. Now we have a breaking news. Japan has issued a tsunami advisory after an offshore 6.7 magnitude earthquake struck a northern Pacific region. According to the Japan Meteorological Agency, the quake has struck around 5:03 p.m. local time in waters off of Iwate Prefecture, prompting the advisory for a possible tsunami up to 3 feet high. Now moving on, we have another breaking news from Middle East. Saudi Arabia says that it has executed 2 citizens for joining a terrorist group that planned to carry out attacks on places of worship, according to a statement from the Interior Ministry. The 2 men also planned attacks against security facilities and personnel, although the statement did not indicate when any of the attacks were planned to have taken place. And that's a wrap on Africa Brief. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
Grew as the interparliamentary